I was about to marry my boyfriend of 10 years, Derek. Everyone said I was his one true love, his white moonlight. I used to believe it too, until a week before the wedding, when he organized an anniversary celebration. Sophie congratulated us on our 4-year anniversary. But this year was supposed to be our 10-year milestone, and I wasn't Sophie. I once read a question on a forum: what is it like to prepare for a wedding after being in a long-term relationship? After much hesitation, I typed my answer. Love had shifted into familiarity. He had started finding fault with the faint crow's feet at the corners of my eyes and the lingering scent of cooking oil on my skin. But I lacked the courage to end it. We had been together for too long. "Sweetheart, I've prepared a surprise," Derek texted me, sharing his location at the Grand Hotel. He hadn't given me any prior notice. It had been 5 years since he'd done anything remotely surprising or romantic. I hesitated, but eventually put on a white silk dress I had just purchased, applied flawless makeup, and headed to the Grand Hotel. The lobby was decorated beautifully: red carpets, fresh flowers, and a white-draped wedding altar. Was all this for me? My heart raced as I stepped onto the red carpet. Derek, dressed in a black suit, stood with his back to me, murmuring something to himself as if rehearsing. Warmth spread through me. I was 29, no longer at the peak of my youth. It had been years since Derek showed me this kind of attention. "Sophie, happy 4-year anniversary. Here's to many more wonderful years together." My heart froze. My name isn't Sophie. It's Emily. This year marks our 10th anniversary. So who is this anniversary for? Derek. A cheerful voice rang out from the doorway. I turned and saw a young woman in a pink dress, 5 or 6 years younger than me, with a sweet and innocent expression. She resembled me, but only slightly. Derek spun around, looking surprised to see me. "Emily, what are you doing here?" I stared calmly at his panicked face and the girl by the door. "Derek, I don't want to get married anymore." A week before the wedding, I broke off the engagement. Luckily, we hadn't signed any legal documents yet. Everything could still be undone. Derek was 2 years younger than me. He had grown tired of me, tired of my aging looks and the life we shared. For years, I thought I was his gentle, idyllic, white moonlight. But today, I realized I wasn't. Derek had been in love with Sophie all along. Their connection had been ongoing for 4 years, long enough for him to prepare an anniversary celebration for her. 2 days ago had been our actual anniversary. Do you know what day it is today? I had asked Derek that evening. He had been playing on his phone, not even sparing me a glance. What day? No gifts, no surprises. He had completely forgotten our 10-year milestone. Later that night, as I brushed my teeth, he leaned in to scrutinize the corners of my eyes. "Emily, your crow's feet are worse. Last time at dinner, my colleague said you look like my older sister." Derek's sister was 35. The implication was clear. I embarrassed him. I lowered my head, spat out the toothpaste, and muttered, "Sorry, I'll make an effort to do my makeup better next time." Derek was 2 years younger than me, and I had spent years accommodating him, tolerating his immaturity, and supporting him as he grew from a clueless rookie into a successful professional. And this was how he repaid me, with betrayal. One day, while using my computer, Derek had forgotten to log out of his messaging app. I saw his comments about me. "Emily isn't anything special. I guess I've just lost interest." It was bound to happen eventually. For years, I thought I could endure. But now, I realized I didn't have to. I didn't want to. Call me dramatic or foolish, but I wasn't going to marry him. After decisively cutting ties, Sophie sent me a message. "Emily, I need to see you." I frowned and blocked her number. 2 days later, she added me again with a new account. "Emily, I have something important to tell you. You'll want to know." I reluctantly agreed to meet her at a casual diner. I didn't usually eat spicy food because of my sensitive throat, but Sophie insisted this place was close to her office. "Emily, I'm here," Sophie greeted me, clutching a plain handbag. Her pale face carried a faint, almost apologetic smile. She ordered several spicy dishes. I frowned. She hadn't even considered my preferences. "Sis, I'm actually the one Derek has always loved. We grew up together." He didn't date me before because I was too young, but now. Her soft voice trailed off as if trying to console me. I don't want to know, I interrupted coldly. Is this all you wanted to say? If so, there's no point in continuing this conversation. No, Emily. I'm terminally ill. She coughed weakly. I can't take Derek from you. He's only been staying by my side because he knows I don't have much time left. How strange. Why did she think I'd care? I shook my head, meeting her gaze. There's no need to say more. I stood up, ready to leave. Sophie's voice turned tearful as she grabbed my sleeve. Emily, I know I was wrong. Please don't hate me. I tugged twice to free myself, but couldn't. Irritated, I said, I have nothing to do with Derek anymore. What are you trying to achieve? Emily, can't you stop being so shameless? Derek's voice cut through the air. The gazes from those around me were like needles, curious, disdainful, filled with scorn. Derek suddenly pulled Sophie into his arms, patting her back reassuringly. It's okay, Sophie. Luckily, you told me you weren't feeling well, so I rushed over, he said. His eyes locked onto mine, filled with hostility, as if I were his sworn enemy. Sophie sobbed. I just didn't want Emily to hate me. Oh, is that so? I sneered. You went out of your way to tell me Derek loves you, then pretended to be unwell to lure him here? You expect me to believe your motives are so pure? Derek grabbed a cup of hot water from the table and flung it toward me. The water was scalding, and I couldn't completely dodge it. My neck bore the brunt, leaving a red burn. A server hurried over with an ice towel to help. Embarrassed and in pain, I pressed the towel against my neck. How foolish of me. How could I have stayed with someone like this for 10 years? Whether I was merely a stand-in or his one and only, it no longer mattered. I had begun to hate him. I decided to move out. I wanted to leave the city and start anew. But then, I realized I'd left something important at the place Derek and I once shared, a photo album. Want it? Come and get it, Derek texted me, attaching a photo of the album. The picture showed it sitting on a table at an upscale restaurant in the suburbs, private room number 6. I almost wanted to give up on the album entirely, but after much hesitation, I decided to go. He was right, there was one photo in that album that held immense significance for me. When I opened the door to the private room, the chatter abruptly ceased. Ignoring the stares, I walked straight to Derek. The album, give it to me. I extended my hand. Derek gestured to the table. The album had oil stains on it. I wiped it with a wet napkin and began flipping through the pages. One photo was missing and my heart sank. It was the one I cherished most. Looking for something? Derek said mockingly, slapping the missing photo onto the table. It was a picture of me and another man, both smiling brightly on a university campus. I was sitting in a wheelchair. Give it back, I demanded, unwilling to waste any more words. That's Nathan, I explained coldly. He was a senior I greatly respected. Before he left for overseas studies, we took this photo together. Apart from collaborating on academic projects, we had no other relationship. But Derek, as if possessed, held up the photo to show his sycophantic friends. Take a look at how cheap Emily is. Dating me while cozying up to another guy. And this senior of hers? Already married at the time. The room erupted in laughter, with Derek's cronies pointing at the photo and sneering. My face turned ashen, my glare icy as I stared at Derek. Watch your mouth, I said bitterly. Filthy minds see filth everywhere. The reason I cherished this photo was that Nathan had passed away. His wife was recently collecting keepsakes related to him, and I had promised to send her this picture. Give it back, I demanded again, my patience gone. Suddenly, Derek stood up and, in a few swift motions, tore the photo into pieces. Like snowflakes, the fragments floated to the ground. After shredding the last piece, he crumpled it up and flung it at my face. Pick it up, Emily, he sneered. I glanced at the mess of scraps on the floor. The last glimmer of hope in my eyes extinguished. There was a bottle of vodka on the table. I grabbed it and poured it over Derek's head, drenching him from top to bottom. Derek wiped his face in a fury. Emily, how dare you? Don't discuss me again, I interrupted, tossing the bottle back onto the table. The force sent glassware clattering, spilling shards into the dishes. I turned and left without looking back. I didn't need the photo anymore. Because, well, I wouldn't be around much longer myself. Emily, stop right there. Derek shouted, enraged. If you walk out that door, don't you dare come back. Explain what? What was left to say? I didn't stop. I didn't need to explain anything, not to him, not to anyone. Miss Emily, your depression is worsening. You'll need support from family to cooperate with treatment, the psychiatrist told me. I don't have any family, I replied, my voice hollow and lost. My parents were once alive, but they're gone now. All I had left was Derek. And now I only have myself. I'm not afraid of death. I'm just afraid I haven't lived a life exciting enough. My parents were so accomplished, so driven, they might be disappointed in me. I decided to start a new life in a new city. I was almost 30. I wouldn't date again. I wouldn't put myself through another cycle of patching things up, only to have them fall apart. Even porcelain dolls that fall to the ground crack and cannot always be mended. Take your medication on time, the psychiatrist reminded me. I stored the pills in colorful glass jars, pretending they were candy. If I lied to myself long enough, I might start to believe it, just like I had convinced myself that Derek was simply young, that he would fall in love with me, that he would see how much I cared for him. I had been a terrible actor, spinning a lie only I believed in. I couldn't endure any more of this. 10 years of devotion, for years of betrayal, being scalded with hot water, publicly humiliated, having my treasured photo destroyed, I had no strength left to love anyone again. I simply couldn't. I used to think my greatest fear was losing something, but I've realized what I feared most was being abandoned. This time, I was the one letting go. And yet, even in a new city, I couldn't escape misfortune. Derek called me again, saying he wanted to talk, that he still wanted to marry me. In the background, I could hear Sophie crying. Ah, a lover's quarrel, I see. I was merely a tool to them, a pawn in their arguments. I thought I made myself clear, I said. Please leave me alone. If you don't, I'll call the police. Tears fell onto my light gray pants, one drop after another, as I spoke slowly. I couldn't understand why people were willing to spend so much time on something as fleeting as love. There were so many more important things in life. Emily, it wasn't because of a fight that I realized how good you are. Derek kept explaining himself to me, but I wouldn't listen. Then, every day, I started receiving roses. It didn't surprise me that Derek had ways to find out where I lived. However, I never once kept the roses. I tossed them out with the trash downstairs. I had thought about moving somewhere else, but I didn't want the hassle. I had told myself already I was turning 30. I had to focus on working and managing my health. I had no extra energy for irrelevant matters. If necessary, I would call the police. There was a week when I didn't receive any roses. That was great. It seemed like everything was finally coming to an end. That evening, after work, I dragged my exhausted body back to my apartment complex. As soon as I entered the hallway, I saw Derek. Once sunny and vibrant, he now looked unkempt, with stubble on his face and dark circles under his eyes, seeming several years older than me. I didn't even unlock my door. The moment I saw him, I called building security. Emily, don't push me away, he pleaded, trying desperately to grab my hand. Everything before was a misunderstanding. I never liked Sophie. I thought you were with Nathan. Shut up. I estimated how long it would take for security to arrive, my hand lightly gripping the small knife in my pocket. I was determined to protect myself. My body was a gift from my parents, and even though they were gone, I wouldn't let it be harmed. What I hated most about Derek was his arrogance. He always spoke with this presumed understanding of what I thought or wanted. Who cared what he thought? His gaze softened as he looked at me. Emily, you've lost weight. I'm not here to bother you. I just want to hug you. My sense of smell has always been sharp. At that moment, I caught a faint floral scent lingering on him, clearly a woman's perfume. My own preference was for cool, woody fragrances. I could easily tell where that scent came from. It was laughable, really. He had the audacity to say he wanted to hug me while smelling like his girlfriend's perfume. I took a step back, and the light in Derek's eyes dimmed instantly. Emily. Security arrived and escorted him out. They assured me he wouldn't be allowed back into the building. Thank you, I said with a bitter smile. Lately, my depression had worsened. Every action Derek took, sending flowers, showing up uninvited, pushed me closer to the edge of a breakdown. I knew that if this harassment continued, I wouldn't survive it. But I had tried. I had done everything to avoid running into him. I couldn't let someone like him ruin me. I worked to adjust my mindset, hoping to get better. And then Sophie's friend, Rachel, showed up. She cornered me in an alleyway. So you're Emily? You look so old, she sneered, flanked by a few rough-looking guys. There were no security cameras in the alley. You have no right to judge me, I said, trying to stay calm, though my legs were trembling. No one could face a situation like this without fear. Raindrops began to fall, turning the already muddy alley into a slippery mess. Hey, you guys want to see what this old hag is like? Find out how she seduced Derek. Rachel giggled as she gave the command. When pushed to the brink, people sometimes discover an unexpected strength. Ever since moving to this new city, I had carried a small knife in my bag for self-defense. I pulled it out now. They cursed at me, calling me a madwoman. But I knew what I was defending: my rotten, tattered sense of dignity. If I even had any left. Perhaps I had lost it years ago when I fell for Derek. My self-respect had been stripped away piece by piece. But I refused to lose everything. I already didn't have a youthful appearance or much money. If I lost my dignity too, I would be no different from the walking dead. I had promised my parents that I would live a good life. I'm sorry, Mom and Dad. I'm not young anymore, yet I'm still such a mess, barely holding myself together. That day, the rain poured relentlessly. I came down with a fever and spent several days on an 4 drip at the hospital. I was alone the entire time. People my age around me had family or spouses by their side. But I had no one. I had gotten used to it. Never underestimate the power of habit. Emily, your husband is here to see you. As I was about to be discharged, a young nurse I got along with teased me. What husband? I asked, confused. She pointed to a man standing nearby. All the blood in my body seemed to rush to my head. It was Derek. What was he doing here again? He held a bag of fruit, dressed in casual sneakers and jeans. I used to love seeing him in outfits like that. They made him look young. But he had always preferred to dress more maturely, so he rarely wore them. I couldn't even be bothered to look at him properly. I turned to the nurse. He's not my boyfriend. Could you please ask him to leave? The nurse, perhaps thinking we were just a quarreling couple, walked off to check on another patient. Emily, Derek called softly. Don't be disgusting. Just leave, I said, closing my eyes. If he didn't leave, I'd just pretend he wasn't there. He would only wallow in self-pity, convinced he had sacrificed so much for me. That was all he was capable of. Emily, you didn't used to treat me this way, he said, peeling an apple beside me. You used to be so kind to me. You stayed up late knitting me a scarf, ran across 3 blocks to get my favorite pastries when I was sick, and took care of me so attentively. I kept my eyes closed, unmoved, pretending to rest. Derek's voice gradually faded as he noticed my lack of response. I thought you didn't hate me, Emily. Just treat me as if I'm younger and prone to making mistakes, he said, attempting humor. Funny, did I not make any mistakes when I was young? I continued to rest with my eyes closed, unwilling to engage. His tone became increasingly despondent. Emily, just say something to me, even if it's to scold me. The Derek I used to know was so proud. How could he say such pitiful things? He must have been hurt by Sophie, I thought. Suddenly, his voice picked up, filled with misplaced cheer. But it's okay, Emily. I quit your job for you. I've spoken to your... My eyes snapped open, and I gripped the armrest tightly. What did you say? I asked, my voice strained. I know your boss. I've already submitted your resignation. From now on, you only need to marry me and stay at home. His tone turned jubilant. You're finally talking to me, Emily. I wanted to cry, but there were no tears left. The career I had painstakingly built was now destroyed by him, just like that. Why don't you go to Sophie? I asked him. Stop tormenting me, I'm begging you. Mary Sophie, leave me alone. Why do you have to ruin the life I've worked so hard to rebuild? Emily, Derek said slowly. Sophie was faking her illness. She never had a terminal disease. Derek had discovered something off about Sophie. She claimed to be unwell, yet she was lively, even planning trips for the two of them. Suspicious, Derek took her to a hospital he trusted, and the results showed she was perfectly healthy. Sophie panicked and admitted she had lied because she loved him too much. She pleaded with him for a long time, but Derek ultimately broke up with her. He told me he wanted to take care of me. By take care, he meant quitting my job, taking my bank cards, and dragging me back to that nightmarish city, to that nightmarish house. In his rush, he even forgot to pack the colorful glass jar on my desk. I ran out of medication. I was sick. Derek didn't believe me. But that didn't give him the right to take me away without reason. You're lying again, aren't you? Just so you can avoid staying by my side, he said as he locked me in the house. I knew reasoning with him was futile. His mental state seemed even worse than mine. When he was happy, he would hold me, brush my hair, and buy me pretty hairpins and snacks, just like when we were in college. When he was upset, he would say all sorts of nonsensical things. You're mine for this lifetime, he whispered in my ear. Do you even know how your parents died? I covered my ears in disgust, but he pried my hands away and continued in a slow, deliberate tone. Your parents wanted to harm mine, and that's why they died. I shook uncontrollably and slapped him hard. Shut up. Just shut up. He had no respect. Not for my late mentor Nathan. Not for my parents. Why was he so self-centered? I only love you, Emily, he said, wrapping his arms around my waist intimately. I remained unresponsive. You don't love me, I said coldly. You love yourself. Someone as selfish as you, it's ridiculous. I was so blind to have liked someone like you. I regret it now. Derek wasn't always like this. He used to call me Big Sister and tell me that wherever I was, that was home. I'd always had a home, but he destroyed it. He kept me locked up, took away my phone, and forbade me from leaving. You'll come around, he said with certainty. But I knew I wouldn't. I didn't trust him anymore. I didn't trust anyone anymore. Everyone I trusted was gone. I stopped arguing with him. Every day, I drew the bedroom curtains tight and curled up in the small, enclosed space like a moldy fungus or a decaying fruit. Derek insisted on telling me stories or doing other things to bring back our memories, trying to restore the bond we once had. I had been off my medication for quite some time. I felt like I couldn't hold on any longer. One day, I found an opening Derek had forgotten to lock the door. I grabbed my phone and slipped out. When he called, I was standing on a bridge, staring down at the icy, rushing river below. Where are you, Emily? Say something. Derek's voice came through the phone. The wind on the bridge was cold, and I shivered. I can't do this anymore, Derek, I said softly. I wasn't lying, I really couldn't go on. Derek panicked, his voice frantic as he begged me to wait. I'm coming for you. I'll save you. Don't come to hurt me anymore, I said with a bitter laugh, taking a swig from a half-empty bottle of beer as I sat on the bridge's edge. Don't let me see you again. At least if I die, I won't have to see you anymore. I never loved Sophie. You have to believe me, Emily, he cried desperately. I only went to her because I thought you and Nathan had something going on. I've always loved you. Don't do this. His voice was hoarse from pleading, but mine was barely a whisper. I've had depression for a long time. Congratulations to both of us. We'll finally be free of each other soon. People had always said we were incompatible, that we wouldn't last. They were right. I should have been more cautious back then. But I made a mistake. I wasted the best 10 years of my life on Derek. Don't come looking for me in the next life, I murmured. Promise me that. If there's a next life, let's never meet again. Emily, don't scare me. A loud splash. The line went dead. Your call cannot be completed as dialed. According to the morning news, a woman's body was found under a bridge in City A. I closed my eyes, listening to the report as a flight attendant handed me a small cup of tea and coffee. Thank you, I said with a smile. Just a few days ago, Derek had been uncharacteristically careless and forgot to lock the door. That gave me the opportunity to slip out. I then staged a dramatic suicide attempt on the bridge, no surveillance cameras there. In the end, I threw my phone into the water, turned around, and used the cash I had to hail a cab back to my rented apartment. When Derek had confined me, I hadn't been able to take much with me. Luckily, my basic identification documents were still in the drawer, along with some cash I had exchanged recently. I had a premonition of what might happen, so I had converted my savings into cash. After replacing my phone SIM card, I bought a ticket to another city, far away, where Derek would never find me. But who could have guessed? A woman's body really was found under that bridge in City A. Sophie, it turned out she had taken her life out of guilt. Or maybe it was something else. Either way, I was ready to start anew. Oh, there's one thing I forgot to mention. Derek's complicated feelings toward me, his mix of love and hatred, all stemmed from my parents. He believed that my parents had caused the accident that killed his parents. But that wasn't true. I knew the truth. Our families had been very close. It was nothing like what Derek imagined. The accident happened during a trip both families took together. The car's brakes failed. Derek stubbornly believed it was sabotage by my parents, but it wasn't. It was nothing more than a tragic accident. My parents were just unlucky. They didn't survive, leaving me all alone. Sometimes I blame his parents too. If they hadn't suggested that trip, maybe the accident wouldn't have happened. But I know that's just wishful thinking. It already happened, and there's no point dwelling on it. I need to move forward, to chase my dreams, do the work I love, and keep looking ahead. I will be okay. 3 years later, I ran into an old college friend. "I can't believe you didn't stay with Derek." She stopped mid-sentence, her expression turning awkward. That's when I found out Derek had taken his own life. Something shifted inside me. Was I sad? I wasn't sure. "I like you. Let's be together," his confession from years ago echoed in my mind. Those were simpler, passionate days. But they were long gone. People change. Derek had ended his life late one night the same week I left. He left a note apologizing to me. It wasn't necessary. "Derek, if there's an afterlife, don't wait for me. Let's never meet again." Derek's perspective. I always believed Emily's parents caused the brake failure, that they wanted my parents dead. That's why my feelings for Emily were so conflicted. I loved her, but I felt like I shouldn't. Back in college, I confessed my feelings to her. Emily was amazing. She didn't reject me. Instead, she hugged me tightly. Her faint, wintry scent enveloped me, and I felt so happy. I swore I would marry her one day. "Your girlfriend seems really close to Nathan," some nosy friends teased. "Shut up," I snapped, my face darkening. But the seed of doubt had been planted. How could she? I was her boyfriend. That afternoon, I came across Emily and Nathan taking a photo together. I felt a pang of irritation. Why? Why did she need him? That evening, during a walk, I lashed out at her for the first time. "Why do you always walk so slowly? You're always making me wait." I complained. "I'm sorry. I'll do better," she said, lowering her head. Emily never argued back, no matter how unreasonable I was. Slowly, I got used to it, used to taking out my frustrations on her. I knew she would always forgive me, no matter what. That's just who she was. She always reflected on her own faults first. But Emily was already doing so much. Yet, to me, it wasn't enough. I wanted her whole world to revolve around me. She didn't need anyone else. Only I loved her. In hindsight, I realized this was emotional manipulation. But back then, I just wanted Emily to belong to me alone. That outfit looks awful. It's so ugly, I would say. The neckline is too low. Why are you so annoying? Under my constant criticism and complaints, Emily's mood darkened. She started smiling less. Why aren't you happy? Her gloomy demeanor only made me angrier. It became a vicious cycle. I'd criticize her, she'd become upset, and I'd criticize her even more. Emily stopped laughing. Around that time, I met Sophie. She reminded me of a more vibrant version of Emily, maybe 50 to 60% similar. If Emily could turn to Nathan, then I could turn to Sophie. But Sophie was demanding. She would constantly make me choose between her and Emily. "Stop pretending you don't understand," I told her. I never intended for things with Sophie to last. She was just a way to spite Emily. But then Sophie told me she had a terminal illness. I wanted to make it up to her. After all, she only had a few months left to live. I planned to take care of her and then return to Emily to rebuild our life together. That's how I justified it to myself. But on our 4-year anniversary, Sophie sent Emily a message from my phone saying she had a surprise for her. When Emily saw me with Sophie, her expression was a mix of sadness and relief, maybe? I didn't understand it at the time. To me, Sophie's illness meant she deserved more of my attention. Emily broke up with me. Is it because of Nathan? I lost my temper and tore up a photo in front of her. Emily, for the first time, was truly angry. As I watched her leave, a sudden wave of panic washed over me. I had a premonition that this time, once she left, she wouldn't come back. But I was only acting out of spite. I loved her more than anyone else. I didn't love Sophie. Sophie had become increasingly unreasonable. She wanted me to marry her, to completely erase Emily from my life. I decided to break up with Sophie. After Emily left, I suddenly understood what loneliness was. There was no one to pick me up when I got drunk, no one to rub my temples when I was exhausted, no one to bring me a cup of hot milk while I worked. "You were spoiled by Emily," a friend once told me. I didn't believe it at the time, but now I do. Emily had taken such good care of me that it had become a habit, one I didn't realize I relied on until she was gone. The roses I bought for Emily, she threw them all away. When I went to see her, she refused to meet me. That day, I was dejectedly kicked out by security. Sophie called me. "You went to see Emily again. What's so good about her?" I was so tired. Sophie had made a mistake. She had deluded herself into thinking she could replace Emily. Why did I ever like Sophie? Then came an even bigger revelation that stunned me. Sophie had never been terminally ill. When her lie was exposed, she panicked. "Derek, I just love you so much. I just wanted to marry you," she pleaded. I shoved her away. "Don't ever come to me again." How had I not seen Sophie's manipulative side before? She played the part of the weak, pitiable woman perfectly, making me feel the need to protect her. And then I thought of Emily again. Emily often endured things she shouldn't have had to, always so calm on the surface. But deep down, she must have felt hurt. Every time I found her annoying, her back would straighten as if she were bracing herself, looking like a scolded child. Such a wonderful person, and yet I pushed her away. No, I couldn't leave things like this. I had to get Emily back. I brought Emily back to the house we once shared. But she was like a cold, lifeless doll now, unresponsive to anything around her. Whether I held her or spoke to her, she wouldn't react at all. I didn't want this version of Emily. I knelt before her, begging her, "Say something to me, anything. I swear I'll never go back to Sophie again." That day, after bringing Emily back, I grew suspicious and started investigating the cause of her high fever. When I uncovered the truth, it felt like being punched in the gut. What exactly were Sophie and her friends trying to do to Emily? If Emily hadn't fought back, I couldn't even bear to imagine what might have happened. I confronted Sophie, arranging to meet her at a cafe. She arrived wearing an exquisitely tailored white dress, her makeup flawless. "Derek, you finally." I cut her off, showing her the chat logs between her and her friend, as well as the transactions they had with those thugs. Sophie's face turned pale. Her act was clumsy, really. She could never compare to Emily, not even close, not even her face. "Let me explain," she began. I merely looked at her coldly. "Sophie, you know what you need to do." Her legs trembled, and she collapsed onto the floor. Sophie was a smart woman. She must have understood what I meant. "You think you really love Emily? You're just a selfish bastard. You've only ever loved yourself." This woman, usually so composed and elegant, now screamed uncontrollably. I ignored her because her words had struck me. Did I really love Emily? I was certain I loved her. But everything I had done, Every choice I made had hurt her. A few days later, I heard that Sophie had gone missing. And then, Emily went to the bridge. She wanted to end her life. I rushed there as fast as I could, but when I arrived, the bridge was empty. I broke down and called the police. They immediately began searching the river, both upstream and downstream. They only found Sophie's body. Had Sophie chosen to end her life here too? But Emily's body was never recovered. I couldn't even prove that I was her relative or friend because we had already broken up. When I stumbled back home in a daze, I saw my parents waiting for me. "You idiot!" My mother slapped me across the face. She knew about my planned marriage to Emily. "I know what you've done to Emily recently. Do you think you can face her parents after all this?" Her chest heaved with fury. That night, I learned something even more shocking. The brake failure wasn't caused by Emily's parents. To be precise, it was her parents who had saved mine. That day, my parents were supposed to drive the car with the faulty brakes. But Emily's parents, noticing the car was old and worn, offered to switch cars. I was consumed by despair. What had I said to Emily back then? And now, Emily was gone, perhaps forever. My family owed her far more than we could ever repay. I swallowed a large number of sleeping pills and drifted into a dream. In the dream, I was confessing to Emily for the first time. "Emily, I like you." I opened my arms to her. Emily smiled faintly and brushed past me as if she hadn't heard. I reached out, trying to grab her, but my hands closed around nothing but air. I knew I was dying. "Emily, wait for me. I'll be there soon. On the road to the afterlife, I'll keep you company so you won't be alone."